This is the class from Blue Ridge, the Henderson County History and Heritage class. This is Reverend Walt Christian. He's also pastor of Eddyville Methodist. So he does Dana and...
He's schizophrenic is what he's trying to say.
So I'm going to let Reverend Christian talk to you for just a few minutes, and I think he's got the church open. And then we're going to go out here because I'm going to do the rest of this lecture out in this area because there's some things you can see better from up there.
That's true. Well, good morning.
Morning.
And welcome to Dana United Methodist Church, the old Blue House it's called. There's been a campground here since the early 1800s, but around 1830, the best information we have, a man named Leander Case. This Case family owned property from here all the way down to Refuge. They're still around, as you well know. But Leander started a school around 1830, the first school, and it was called Blue Ridge at that time. The Ridge Road and Dana, or what we call Upward Road, is part of the Continental Divide. It runs pretty much, follows that road. In fact, it swerves off and goes diagonal through this church building. On down the road, and you probably, if you've driven 26, you've seen the sign for the Continental Divide there, and there's another one on 64 going to the lake. But this was the way people traveled. The following the rivers didn't work out. The Green River was pretty well impassable early on, but a lot of traffic came through here, and Howard Gap, as you all know. There was a community here, farmers and whatnot, along the ridge, and in 1830 he started a school for the community that had grown up. That became Blue Ridge Academy sometime after the Civil War. Leander was also a postmaster, and buildings back then were pretty rare, expensive, so they shared duty, and somewhere along the line the post office, the school, and the church all kind of came together. They shared the building. This building, the cemetery was here first. There was a brush arbor church and then a log cabin church, and the cemetery's been here since probably also around 1830s to 1860. We don't have any Revolutionary War people, but we've got every war since then. Civil War, Spanish American, 1 and 2, and Korea veterans are buried out here. What else? Oh, in one of the things, this area is called Dana because in 1890 a family called the Hadleys came down here from Vermont, New Hampshire, and he built a hotel which is down near the post office is now, I think.
It was where that Advent Christian Church
Advent
is.
Christian, right? Because there was a tower next to it.
That was the observation.
Oh, right. Hadley had a son named Dana, and that's where the name of the town came from, because he also set up a post office with the hotel. And Blue Ridge actually moved down the road to what we call 5 Points now, the intersection of Ridge Road and Sugarloaf. There was also a post office there. So this church was established around 1860. The war came along and delayed everything. The property that was the hotel, part of it was deeded. The observation tower was out in here. And I've got a deed inside that shows that part of that property included the observation tower. But it became the church's property and the rest of the cemetery. What else?
I'm going to go over some of this.
Okay, good.
1861, the first building.
Right, okay.
And the Blue Ridge School was 1830, like you said. Later on known as the Blue Ridge Academy. And it was the very first school in the county to open after the Civil War, because all the schools closed during the Civil War. And that was William Gunaway Brownlow Morris, who became so famous as a superintendent of education, who ran this school for many years after the Civil War. This was the site, as he said, of the Blue Ridge Post Office in 1859 with Leander Case. And it actually, the post office actually sat more in the cemetery. It wasn't up here, it was back in this area. Then Benjamin K. King, here he was the postmaster. And then Hiram D. Justice, Justice. And they moved, when Hiram D. Justice became postmaster, they moved the post office to the old Justice home place where Dana Baptist Church sits today. And as we leave, you'll see Dana Baptist on the right. But that church was not founded until 1936. In 1895, they moved the post office, where he said, to 5 Points, the junction of Ridge Road, Sugarloaf Road, where there was a store on the right. And the Blue Ridge Post Office closed in 1906. Buried here is Bob and I's great-great-grandmother, Mary Caroline Justice Jones. She's buried up here, so Hiram King Jones descendants, this is her grave up here. Albert Merriman Branch Blackwell, who served as sheriff of Henderson County from 1908 to 1912, son of Thomas Blackwell and Nancy Justice. He was a school teacher at the Upward School that we're going to talk about this afternoon, and he resigned at the end of his second term because of poor health. We have Samuel Pinckney Case, who served in the Spanish-American War. We have 7 Union soldiers who joined the Union Army in the last year, a few months of the war. Francis Blackwell, John Blackwell, Thomas Blackwell, Alfred Duncan, James Hammett, Jeremiah Taylor, and Lynch Young. There are 9 Confederate soldiers buried here. William Blackwell, Charles Case, Thomas Jefferson Case, Andrew Jackson, Hiram P.M.D. King, John Liverette, Adolphus Paris, Jasper Revis, and John Young. Now, we can walk through the church if you want to, but I also want you to go up through the cemetery, because you can see the Dana School right over here. We're not going to drive to the Dana School. You can see it sitting right there. Dana School was built in the early 1920s. And when they built the Dana School during that school consolidation program of the 1920s, which this class hadn't gotten to yet, they built that school and they moved all the smaller 1-room, 2 and 3 and 4-room schools into Dana School. A fire destroyed most of Dana School in the 1970s. An arsonist set fire to it. Bob, what's still left of the old Dana School? The gym?
The original lunchroom part that was, or it's a lunchroom now. It was a kindergarten when we went there. It's still there, but it's built into the school now.
It's within the school, so you can't see it.
It's within
so
the school.
the only thing you can see is the gym.
The only thing you can see is the gym.
But you can see it from the cemetery if you go up. This is just like all those early 1920s schools. This was an Earl Stillwell designed school. And so the gym is all that remains up there. But what makes this really important is there's a house falling apart. You see that old house falling down? Go up to the back of the cemetery for your photos. That was the school, the Blue Ridge School, the Blue House School, that closed when they built Dana. We together on this? Now it's falling down, but to get your pictures, you can't go on the property. There's no trespassing. It's very dangerous. So you're going to have to take the pictures from the back of the cemetery, the fence. That is the Blue House. That is the Blue Ridge School, the Blue Ridge Academy, the Blue House, for which this whole section got its name. There's 2 things. One is that at some point there was some blue paint in there. I don't believe that story. I believe this is the Blue Ridge. It was the Blue Ridge Campground, the Methodist campground site. Remember how I've taught you about how the Methodists had campgrounds and they met, and then they had itinerant circuit riding ministers, and then they would build churches. Well, this is the Blue House, the Blue Ridge Campground meeting site. They didn't build the church to 1860, but they were meeting here. That's why the cemetery is much older than the church. The school set up somewhere in a part of the cemetery, my guess is where there's new graves, not the old graves, but a newer grave. So it was further up toward the back, and people just began calling it the Blue House. That's blue for Blue Ridge. because it was Blue Ridge Academy. Then later on, people would just say the Blue House, the Blue House, the Blue House. The church
Still
was the Blue House.
Road out there.
There's Blue House Road across the street. This was the Blue House. Okay.
And the Dolly Case, who this road and the trailer park is named for, actually lived in that house up until the late 1990s. And you could still see the room numbers on the doors from the school time. It was also a post office for a little while, and a precinct. Voting took place there. So it had a lot of remnants in it, but she lived there, I know, through the 1990s, maybe into 2000 something. She passed away 2000 something, I'm not sure exactly. But a lot of history out here, a lot of names. One of the interesting things that happened is people were I guess religious. I mean, the Bible was one of the main books read, but denominations weren't a real big thing. So it was whichever preacher was passing through, and it turns out some of the people that actually built the original building here were influenced by an Adventist. That was called Second Advent Church at one time.
Yeah, and then later Advent Christian,
right.
I think.
Yeah. But they actually still own property. So John Case, one of the founders of this church, actually moved down and helped found that church as well. There were Dunkers.
Yeah,
the
we're going to talk
German
about that
Dunkers
down in
Upward.
yeah.
Okay, Crossroads.
Yeah, Crossroads.
Okay. But Dana was a booming community at one time, and I guess that was true of most of the little communities that were intersections, because it was a farming community. The processing plant, which a piece of it is still left down there, was one of the biggest ones in this area, and during World War II produced vinegar, and was one of the top producers of vinegar in the area. So it had a baseball team, it had a general store and a post office. I mean, it was booming. It's hard to tell it now, but that little intersection down there was quite a community at one time, up until probably the 50s, 40s, maybe 40s. Railroad changed it, and then highways changed it, and progress caught up with it.
So let's.
I want to hear what you have to say.
No, that's all I got to say. I just want to say before we leave, so I'm giving you some time to go through church and go take pictures of the Blue House and the gym there at Dana. You can see it all from the back of the cemetery. We're going to leave here, and we're going to keep on down Ridge Road, and we're going to turn right on Step Mill Road. I want to explain that Ben Merrill originally set up a grist mill behind Refuge Baptist Church on Tumblebug Creek. I need to emphasize this because the Dana planning, in the Henderson County Planning Department's thing for Dana, it's got more mistakes than I've ever seen in anything in my life. I have no idea who wrote that. So it's wrong.
They didn't know the area. Yeah.
Ben Merrill originally set up his mill on Tumblebug Creek behind Refuge Baptist, and he called it Oleta. And it was an Oleta grist mill. And that was about 1908, something like that. In 1913, he moved, and he set up the grist mill over here where we're going on Step Mill Road. And he had an Oleta post office as the other grist mill. He closed that post office. And he came over here and built this mill on Step Mill Road and named it Sackanon. So that's the Sackanon post office, and it was the Sackanon grist mill, and it was owned by Benjamin Merrill, whose wife was a step. And we're going to talk more about that when we get down to Oleta Falls, but all that's step land. The post office closed, the Sackanon post office closed in 1923. The Oleta post office closed in 1913 when he moved and established the Sackanon post office. In 1933, Doulis Step bought the grist mill. And it was the last grist mill operating in Henderson County. And I think up in the early 1950s, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So our Larry Justice owned that property. Now Carolyn Justice owns that property. And it's going to be very hard to park when we get down there. We cannot go inside the old post office or the old mill building because of insurance hazards, and she's working on trying to restore things, but it's not done yet. So you can only stay outside. We're going to have to park along the right-hand side of the road. We'll be blocking a lot of traffic.
Not much traffic.
And she said you can park in front of her house, but you can't park in the driveway itself because that's the driveway for another house too. So you can't go in that driveway and park. If you try to pull off the side of the road directly in front of her house, AT&T's put up those sharp little red flags and you're liable to puncture a tire. So don't pull off on the left-hand shoulder. You're going to have to pull off on the right-hand shoulder. And the right-hand shoulder is better to pull off on before we get to the mill. So Susan and I will go as far as we can, pull over, and the rest of you kind of pull in behind. Then you're going to have to walk down to the mill to get the photos. Everybody clear on that? Now we're going to actually turn on Step Mill Road before we get to what all of us locals call 5 Points. It's where Ridge Road and Sugarloaf Road meet. If anybody says go to 5 Points, that's what they're talking about. And there's this old store on the right, and that's where they moved the Blue Ridge Post Office later. And we'll pass Dana Baptist, which is a fairly new church, 1936. Everybody here went to refuge in here before 1936.
And you're welcome to use bathrooms, and there is coffee inside if anybody wants some. I'll get...
Well, it's just that I've just been sitting in there watching TV and I saw y'all.
You look fine. Thank you for telling. Now, tell us about your family.
It was George Washington Case and Dolly Bell Case that bought this land in 47.
Okay.
I think it was about 70 acres in here.
Mm-hmm.
And Papa here had all apple orchards and different places. I mean, it's huge. And he would plant fields of tomatoes, cabbage, beans. We had it all. And Papa had a barn for his cows, and Granny milked, and there's a hen house still up back there, and outhouses, and the well was right here behind the garage, and I've drawed 1,000 gallons of water out of that well.
And we got to go, but tell me quickly about the school.
The school used to just go to, Daddy went to school there back in those days, and I think it only went to the 11th grade.
Uh-huh.
And Daddy finished, but they would let the boys out to come and work the farms.
Okay.
And like
now,
I said,
what's your understanding as far as it being called Blue House?
The Blue House.
Yeah, this house here.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah.
Well, it must have been on account of it was that school.
Okay.
That was first here.
Yeah.
And so it's been several different things. And when Granny died in 2005, she was 100 years old.
Wow.
And
Was she the woman living in there at the time?
she was in there at the time. She got
And this house that's falling down, she was in
Yeah,
there? Wow.
yeah.
And her name was what?
Dolly Bell, the
Dolly
name of the
Bell.
road.
Wow.
And she was my grandmother. And
And what's your name? I'm sorry.
Sandra Case Kent. I'm a granddaughter.
Well, very nice to meet you. And
Yeah.
very nice of you to share all this with
Well,
us.
Granny had 11 children, and my daddy was one of them. And then when Papa died, Granny gave all those kids land in here just to build them a home.
What a
And
blessing.
The community wanted to restore this as a historical site,
Right.
but my uncle who inherited didn't want it, so he's just let it go. So he's
What a
gonna tear it
shame.
down. Yeah, he didn't want the historical
Yeah.
stuff, but
Didn't
it
appreciate
has.
that, yeah.
You wouldn't believe what a wonderful time I had as a little
I bet.
girl riding the tractors. And
Oh, yeah.
going to
Bicycle up and down the
fields.
road and all that. Yep.
Yeah, all this road down here, Ridge Road, the Dana Road.
Yeah, we
was
got to go. They're going to go off and leave us.
well,
Thank
it
you.
was all-
I appreciate that.
all-
I'm going to shake your hand upside down here. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, dear.
But